Tibetan law divided people into different ranks. It stipulated, for example, that if a member of the upper class was murdered, that family would receive compensation in gold equivalent to the victim's weight. But what about a member of the lower classes?
打死了以后怎么赔偿？一根草绳，草编的绳子，这个什么意思呢？西藏就人死了以后送到天葬场，送的时候呢要捆嘛，就这个一根绳子，一根草绳，就是要捆尸体用的，他就这么规定，这就是等级。
When the serfs turned to the monasteries for help, they received none. They were told they were suffering because of sins they'd committed in a past life. The Canadian scholar Tom Grunfeld has described this as a particularly cunning method of control, since the logic was that if a serf tried to change his fate, he could expect his next life to become even worse. So the only thing the serfs could do was accept things as they were and give up any thoughts of changing their fate. The fact was, the monks reaped significant benefits from this system. The Drepung monastery, for example, owned more than 20,000 serfs. A document records that the regent, living Buddha Dacha, received from the 14th Dalai Lama 20 teams of serfs, along with cattle and sheep, from Jiangzhou prefecture. The document dates from the 1940s. Around the time this document was signed, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was promulgated at the United Nations. It reads, in part, "All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms." By the beginning of the 20th century, the system of combining religion with politics was on the verge of collapse, and the serfs were incapable of improving the way they tilled the land. The chinkar barley they grew amounted to only 8 to 10 times more in terms of weight than the seeds they'd sown. Many farmers were so heavily indebted that they were forced to run away. By the middle of the 20th century, the Potala Palace was being shaken by calls for reform, equality, freedom, and an end to persecution. After the founding of the People's Republic of China, the central government sent an invitation to the local Tibetan government to attend peace talks. But the 14th Dalai Lama, who had just taken over the reins of power, fled instead. Accompanied by his closest followers, he left Lhasa and went to the small border town of Yadong, where he awaited developments. The nobles who had fled to Yadong saw their best hope in establishing contacts abroad. So lobbyists were sent to the Western embassies in India, but were turned down everywhere. According to a declassified U.S. State Department document, U.S. Ambassador to India, Lloyd Henderson, was sympathetic. He promised military support for the Tibetan nobles, but only on the condition that the Dalai Lama fled to India and led the fight against the communist Chinese there. This was not what the nobles wanted. Their sole desire was to secure their own political and economic benefits in Tibet. So even while they bargained through Lloyd Henderson with Washington on such matters as their travel expenses and other payments, they were in fact pursuing their own agenda. In late April 1951, representatives of the Tibetan local government arrived in Beijing. At the Beijing Hotel, they held negotiations with representatives of the central government. Huang Mingxin was a translator at those talks. He still vividly remembers one particular detail.
人民两个字，我们那个时候看，当初给它翻成了米色。米色的这个字呢是固有的，不是我们创造的。可是西藏代表反对用这个词，他说这米色的这个意思啊，跟的是等于老百姓，跟这个官员，以至于这个上层的人呢是对立的，啊。所以用了米色的话，就把他们排斥在外了，就把我排斥在外了，达赖也排斥在外了，这个不行，他也提出来用这个米mạng。
The Tibetan representatives thought that the word they proposed covered people of all classes. The final text of the document adopted this word. There were many details like that. Out of respect, the central government adopted most of the suggestions raised by the Tibetan representatives. After 25 days of negotiations, the two sides finally signed the Agreement on Measures for the Peaceful Liberation of Tibet. Under this agreement, the Tibetan people would exercise national regional autonomy under the unified leadership of the central government, and reforms would be carried out in Tibet on the basis of consultation. The agreement also stipulated that the Tibetan people would return to the great family of the motherland, the People's Republic of China. Chairman Mao Zedong had high hopes for the future of Tibet. Immediately after the signing of the agreement, he wrote to the Dalai Lama and sent General Zhang Jingwu with the letter and a copy of the agreement to Yadong. Through this action, Chairman Mao hoped to reassure the Dalai Lama. The agreement stated that officials of various ranks would continue to hold office. The central authorities would not change the existing status, functions, and powers of the Dalai Lama. Not long after this, the Dalai Lama and his entourage returned to Lhasa. In October 1951, the Dalai Lama wrote to Mao Zedong saying that he supported the 17 items in the agreement, that he acknowledged the leadership of the central government, and that he would facilitate the PLA's entry into Tibet. In September 1951, the People's Liberation Army, led by General Zhang Guohua, arrived in Tibet, received a warm welcome from the local government. A ceremony was held to mark its entry into Lhasa.